It's the Schude Talk Show. Yeah. So we are here with the one, the only Jay Feely, who is known for a lot of things, but right now you're kind of known for running for office.
Yeah, a little different.
Oh my gosh, so many things. So you're running for the 1st District for the House of Representatives for Arizona, right?
Correct. So David Schweikert has been the congressman there.
Okay.
He's running for governor, so he was not running for re-election. So it's an open seat, a swing seat, probably the most important swing seat maybe in the country. There's probably 3 or 4 seats that you're looking at that will determine who controls the House in 2026, and that will be one of those seats. And it's a seat that Democrats believe, hey, we have an opportunity to flip because the incumbent is not running for re-election. He's been in 2 very close elections. In 2022, he only won by 2,000 votes. And so they believe we can flip that seat. And, for me, it was... I started running in CD5 here in the Gilbert area where, we've lived for 16 years, where we got to know each other at Gilbert Christian. And, I was on the school board, and Rebecca, my wife, taught in the high school, and I coached like you guys did. I coached high school girls soccer. And, this is where we had kind of poured our life into and why we decided to stay here in Arizona when I was finished playing for the Cardinals. And then the president calls me, and then the Speaker of the House calls me, and then the NRCC calls me, and they say, hey, everybody said, we need you to run in CD1. We're worried. We don't have anybody that we believe can win in the general, and we need to make sure that this seat is a priority and that we win this seat. And so for me, it was an easy decision when they all call and they say it's for the good of the party that we need you to move to switch. We had 2 good candidates in CD5, myself and Mark Lamb, who I know you guys know. And, so we needed somebody who could win that seat, who could speak to independents, because it's a seat that has 1/3 of the voters are independents. Mm-hmm. And, I think you see that throughout the country now. There's a lot of people who don't like the partisan politics, who, don't really resonate with, all of the issues that drive people apart and really want to see this country come together. And at my heart, that's, who Rebecca and I have always been. And so it was very easy for me to do.
So what are your constituents like in that district? Is it Scottsdale or is it...
Yeah, so you got Scottsdale, Cave Creek, Fountain Hills, Paradise Valley. It's kind of that, a little bit of Phoenix. It's a very highly educated district. So
bougie.
It is one of the wealthier districts in the country.
Yeah.
Over 100,000 in median income for each home. Over 50% of the voters have college degrees. But it's an independent district where they have voted for Trump and then voted for Gallego and voted for Katie Hobbs and then voted for Republicans. So they've switched throughout, when you look at the history of the last 10 years. And that's why you have to have somebody who not only can win their party, but also can appeal to independents as well.
Do you think that, saying from your district, but do you think that's all of Arizona? I just thinking about our past elections, like are we officially purple?
When you look at statewide, certainly because we have... It's still a center-right state, but we have a Democrat governor and 2 Democrat senators. And so you have to look at it objectively and say, this is a state that swings one way or the other, depending on, the political reality of that election. And, we do have a good... an increasing number of voters for the Republican Party over the Democrat Party, but you have a big group of independents in the middle that will vote for whichever party they believe best they identify with right now.
It almost seems like, it was interesting. I remember when Carrie Lake was running for governor, like X amount of years ago or whatnot, and I was at kind of like a fundraiser at someone's house that they were doing like an in-home fundraiser, and I remember asking her, and just because she definitely has that kind of probably partisan, politics side of things or whatnot. And that was one thing I said to her. I said, kind of exactly what you're saying. And I said, well, we are Arizona. And I understand that, have probably similar views that I have, that very conservative or whatnot, but kind of like likability, you're just coming across and it's not. So how do we, hey, Mike, we're kind of coming in and out.
You are?
Yeah. So how do you bridge that gap? Kind of exactly what you're saying. We have to be realistic, but I think, and so I being in real estate, have had clients over the past few years, and you always ask, like, why are you moving from Washington? Why are you moving from California or whatnot? And their answer to me was political asylum. Like, really? And so they're like, yes, my kids are getting bullied in school because they lean, more to the right. They say they're Republicans, and they're really being bullied and all of that stuff. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that's insane. So coming down here, but then I check in with them, and they're like, but Arizona Republicans are different than where I'm coming from. Like, you guys are next level in their opinion, which I thought was interesting, because I thought, whether you're either a Republican or a Democrat, but there is, I think, just this move kind of to the middle, like you're saying, where people maybe now are just kind of tired of arguing, tired of like hating each other. And then some of that comes from, you wonder if that's by design. Right? Like, it's like, keep them fighting.
Especially when you look at social media and, you look at the algorithms and what people see, your reality could be completely different than my reality based on what I'm watching and what algorithm is pushing me towards.
For sure.
We see completely different messages. And, for me, the way I think that you resonate with independence, it's going to be determined by who you are and do you care for them. And I think you should be able to have conversations with people that you totally disagree with politically, still give them the respect to listen to them, to hear their opinion, truly to care about them. And I think when the voters here in Arizona, when they find out about Rebecca and I, and they hear the stories about what we've been committed to in our lives, I think they'll see people who truly do want to create those equal opportunities, those pathways to success for everyone, and truly care about people.
Well, and you brought up a good point too. It's the whole the infighting, for sure. But as far as having conversations, like especially social media, but even in person, right? But people just can't have those conversations without getting so fired up. And it's like, I can't tell you that I disagree with you without you taking it as a dig on you personally, like hurting your ego. It's like, no, I actually just don't believe that way. But I want to know, because
but we can still be friends.
Yes,
like, it doesn't have to ruin relationships.
Gosh, yeah. Like, it's just the craziest thing, and maybe it.
And it's sad that you see that.
You
see that around the country. You see families torn apart because of political issues, and friends that no longer can be friends and don't want to go to dinner together because of political issues. And mostly it revolves around President Trump. He is the lightning bolt that causes so many people really to not think logically. I literally was listening this morning to Senator Fetterman, and he was talking about that.
Isn't he kind of a surprise?
Shockingly. Like, I did not think that he would be the voice of reason in the Democrat Party.
Right.
And he's become that. So he said this morning about his own party that what they stand for is just anti-Trump, and that every position they take is just the opposite of whatever position that Donald Trump takes. And, he's been the guy that says, no, if it's something that I believe in, if it's a rational policy that we should implement, just because President Trump implements it, talks about it, doesn't mean that as a Democrat Party, we should push back against it.
Well, and it's true. And honestly, if he's kind of a voice of reason in the Republican Party, right? Because it's both, I feel like it's just both sides as far as like, that everyone should take that issue, right? As far as, and it's kind of like how you're saying, how people are pushing back because it's like, oh, if it's Trump did it, it must be terrible. And we hate him. Like, there is so much hate. Like, the TDS thing is for sure real.
Yeah.
Like, at first I was like, that's weird. I'm like, oh, absolutely. I see it. And some of the stuff that's posted, like the amount of hate to have towards one person makes me believe you are filled with hatred, right?
Which is sad.
It is sad. And that's a miserable existence. But then you have, I feel like, the people who, if Trump says it, then it must be right. Like, that's the way. So it is crazy. And Trump. I only know what I see. And my favorite thing is he's hilarious. Like, I listened and I think he is so funny. With that being said, it doesn't mean that, and I feel like I am a Trump supporter, but then a lot of things going on I have questions about. But I think that should be okay, right? And I'm sure, and he's not the person to be like, oh yeah, you should question me. Of course, I know enough that that's not the case, but I think that you can still like people and not agree with them, right?
Yeah, and you should be able to, and really every American should question the decisions that our politicians make. Are they the right decisions? Are they what's best for America? Are they what's best for our future? And when I look at President Trump, and there's a lot of his policies that he's implemented in this first year that even a lot of Republicans has pushed back against, specifically the tariff policies. but he has had the fortitude to look at the future of this country and truly try to implement the things that he believes and their administration believes is going to be best for our country long term. They aren't always the most expedient right now. They're going to have headwinds right now. Even the war in Iran, you're seeing that because when they made that decision to go in and to bomb Iran and to take out that terrorist regime, they knew that it was going to lead to an uptick in gas prices, which was going to lead to higher energy costs, which is going to lead to higher inflation, which was directly going to hurt the prospects of keeping the House in the midterms. So when I talk about it logically, you had to know that the evidence that they had, that they looked at, the intelligence, was so strong that there was a need to take action now, even if it was going to hurt their own self-interest in the midterm, in the short term. And so, that's the kind of way that I look at those issues. When I look at the economic issues and I look at tariffs, like the easy thing for this administration to do was to just get in and say, hey, we're going to expand energy exploration and bring down cost. We're going to do the tax cut that everyone's going to be in favor of, and then we'll coast into the midterms and, not take on these big issues like the trade imbalance and the lack of investment into this country. And this administration said, no, like that's what we've done for 25 years. That's what led to 7.5 million jobs being offshored to foreign countries. That's what left to 90,000 manufacturing plants leaving this country, which hurts the average American worker. Like Rebecca's dad worked swing shifts for 40 years. He just passed away a couple weeks ago.
I saw that.
And
I'm
and
sorry about that.
Yeah,
That's so
it was hard. And we've talked and thought about his life a lot. But this is a guy who grew up in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, in a very blue collar area, who bought his first home for I think $15,000 and lived in that his entire life, and worked a swing shift job in a factory for 40 years, and was able to provide for his family and put his daughter through college at the University of Michigan on that salary. And you,
thank goodness isn't that where you guys met?
That's where we met. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad he did that. But is that a reality for regular Americans today? And I think for a lot it isn't, because we lost a lot of those jobs. And so I think President Trump said, no, I'm going to utilize tariffs. I'm going to utilize my ability to force these foreign countries to invest back into this country and to bring those jobs back into this country, which is going to help the everyday American.
Well, and I think that he's competitive, right?
Trump?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that's good. And I do believe that he wants to win at all costs for the Americans. But the Iran, so a few things with the Iran war that, when I'm, as, bird's eye level kind of looking in, is I think, oh gosh, like Iraq, right? We were promised and there was great intelligence. So we went in and he wasn't close to having a nuclear weapon. And then now same thing, if you look at roll the tape, look at, and Netanyahu's been saying for 25 years that they're weeks away, they're months away from having a nuclear weapon. So what changed now? So, when you hear something over and over and over, and then living through Iraq, Afghanistan,
and for all of us that lived through it.
Yeah, we're like, what?
We've seen the failures in that policy.
So
nation building does not work in the Middle East. Yeah. We wasted tens of trillions of dollars, thousands of lives,
so many,
that were cost over there. And for what? What did we accomplish? And so I think that is the natural inclination for so many of us to look at this action and just to say, wait, I thought we weren't going to get in foreign wars. I thought we weren't going to try to nation build. And I don't believe that's what this administration is trying to do. I hope that we get out of there quickly, and, that we, took out a terrorist who readily admitted he wanted to kill Americans, that, we were the great Satan, and, he wanted to wipe out the state of Israel. And, that regime, and just look at their own people. They killed almost 30,000 protesters. Their own people willingly killed them because they were willing to stand up against their government. And so, I think it will be a net positive. I think when you look at the big picture, like I do, I think about the economy that is going to determine the next generation's economy is AI. And to win the AI race, you have to be able to produce energy. And right now, China is far and away above everyone else in the world. They're at we're at 1 terawatt trying to get to 2. They're at 3 terawatts trying to get to 6. And they have so many different advantages over us when it comes to producing energy because they can artificially lower the cost of doing production by paying basically slave wages. They can artificially lower interest rates if they want to. They can say, we're not going to have any interest rates on that industry. And they have no environmental issues because they don't care. And so they just do whatever they want. And so we know we have to compete with China in this industry where it's going to determine the economy and the security of the world going forward in this next generation. And what did President Trump do? Well, he cut off 20% of their crude oil by going into Venezuela and then going into Iran. And for a country in China who only produces 10% of their own crude oil in their country, they have to import 90%. Huge advantage, especially looking forward to this meeting in April that President Trump will have with China and having leverage in those negotiations.
So the Iran war, are we in charge? Are we leading that? Are we in charge of epic fury?
You think anybody is telling President Trump what to do? Anybody else? Absolutely, we're in charge.
So he came out today and said that what I guess Israel bombed a gas field in Iran. And he said, well, they didn't tell me they were going to do that, and I wouldn't have done that. And he wasn't happy. He
wasn't happy specifically because also that Iran retaliated by bombing a natural gas field pipeline in Qatar. And so he wanted to make clear exactly what was going on. And by the way, who was in charge. And so, I trust him and his administration. And, I'm hopeful that this doesn't cost a lot of lives. I have a brother in the Air Force and a brother in the Coast Guard. I know like at my heart, like how tragic it is to lose even one American life. And, I feel for those families.
Well, and I think so. It seems like right that it's like when we bombed last year Iran, it was like, this is the only thing. This is going to do it. This is going to be exactly what we need to do so they don't get a nuclear weapon. So that was last year. And so this year, hey, actually, we need to go in. And so I guess, and my thing too is I don't think he's been super clear on the strategy, right? Obviously, you can't say exactly what you're going to do from a national security standpoint, but there hasn't been, and that's why. So what's the exit strategy? It says it's 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, but how do we know that we have won, right? How do we know it was successful, it was worth it? So I guess that's my question too, is like, how do we know? Because it sounds like right now it's like it's scorched earth, right? It's from everyone. It's Israel just bombing crap. We're bombing crap. Iran definitely bombing crap. So it's like, I just don't see, it just doesn't seem very organized, I
think in the readings that I've done, it's certainly much more strategic, and they're very, it's kind of threefold, right? So you go in first, and the first thing you need to do is take out not only their ability to enrich that uranium and try to get a nuclear weapon, but also their ballistic missiles so that we can have safety. And then when you take out those ballistic missiles, the long-range missiles, now you can go in and then you can have the bombers go over and fly over, not worry about them getting shot down. And then they can take out the strategic areas like the island that produces the majority of their oil and make sure that you're not allowing them to have the capability going forward to continue to fight against us. Because the idea is, okay, we're not trying to do regime change. We are trying to have a philosophical change within the country, and hopefully the person who takes over and runs the country doesn't have the same ideals that the Ayatollah had and doesn't try to govern the exact same way.
Well, I think Trump was asked and it said, okay, who's going to take over next? He's like, I don't know. The second and third choice were killed too.
Yeah, we killed like 30 of their top leaders.
So, I mean, I guess that's just, and like you said, not nation building, but I mean, we are trying to do a regime change, but sometimes I think, well, how can you guarantee it's not going to be any worse, right? I mean, we did that.
Well, for 50 years, though, 50 years since Jimmy Carter, this Ayatollah, this philosophy has been about trying to destroy America and destroy Israel. And they were willing to kill American soldiers. They were willing to bomb and do suicide bombings. They were supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. Like the people on the other side who are actively rooting for Hezbollah and Hamas and against our interest, how can you call yourself an American?
Yeah,
I don't understand that at all. Like, I can understand that, well, I don't like war and I don't want to see an American serviceman die. Absolutely understand that. But I can't understand actively rooting for us to not succeed over there. Every American should be rooting for this to be over quickly, for us to have a tremendous success, and to get rid of the number one supporter of terror in the world.
Yeah, oh, 100%. And one thing that I have kind of heard kind of talking heads talk about is like, it would really help if Trump just declared victory. And then I think he did declare victory or started to hint at it. Well, what we've done, we've won, we've won. It's so important for the economy or whatnot when he says things like that. It's great. But then, the bombs are still going off. So
Well, the real concern is the Strait of Hormuz. And, 20% of the world's oil goes through that. They have been actively trying to not allow, to blockade that. And, that is the concern right now. We have to make sure that we open that up. And we need to have control of that moving forward so that you don't have a 20-mile section inhibiting the entire world's, ability to run their economies, because 20% of the world's oil goes through that strait.
But then why is that our job? Because we went in there and like disrupted the flow, and so now we're like, so then we've got our ships, right, like sitting in harm's way.
It's to our interest because of what I talked about. The world's economy with AI will be defined by your ability to produce energy, and if we control that strait, then we really control the world's energy. And they're looking to us then to lead and to allow them, to have that energy that they need. I mean, you look at Germany. And Germany decided, hey, we're going to, for this Green New Deal, we're going to go away from fossil fuels and we're going to go to green energy. And what happened? They had 3 to 4 times the energy cost, and now they're dependent on Russia for oil. And they're in a horrible spot. They've admitted it was a complete failure. And, they did it all for idealism. And that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. I think Republicans are realistic and Democrats govern on idealism. And to me, like, you have to govern on realistic ideas, what's going to function well and what's going to accomplish the goals that you want.
Yeah, for sure. But you brought up Russia. So are we getting out of, we still are funding that war, right?
We are still funding some of the war with Ukraine and Russia. And, I've been a guy that, believes that there's so much of that money that we're sending over there that goes to fraud. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be accountability. And we should not continue to fund it if we can't have accountability for the dollars that we're sending there.
Well, and I'm, just one person that, is interested in this stuff, doesn't know a whole bunch. But when this first happened and Russia was going into Ukraine, I looked at Russia on a map and I looked at the Ukraine and I said, it's not winnable, right? It's not winnable for Ukraine. They're too small. And it's going to be a lot of bloodshed. So my thought was, okay, this will probably be over in 2 weeks, right? Because
it could have been.
Right.
If we had a different president.
Right. Well, 100%.
There was a deal on the table 1 week in that President Biden blew up and would not allow to happen. That war would have been over. You would have saved millions of lives. All the money that was spent there. Unfortunately, that administration did not want to see peace and didn't want that war to end.
What do we do now? Do we just keep funding it?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think there are easy answers. And, the world is worried that if Russia gets Ukraine, that the NATO countries surrounding that would be next. And they're worried about the aggressive push of Russia. And you have to also look at it from the other side. What is Russia trying to do? Well, they don't want to give up their port, the port that is so important to them. And so I think and I hope that President Trump at some point is able to bring them both together and find a compromise that works for both of these countries and end this war. Unfortunately, neither side wants to sit down and come up with a realistic solution that will end it.
And I guess that I'm thinking that if we weren't funding it, Ukraine would have no choice, right? Not that I'm rooting for Russia, obviously, but it just seems like we have a hand in prolonging the amount of deaths and devastation happening over there because we're like, keep going.
Well, I don't say blame us, though. I mean, you blame Russia and you blame Ukraine. I mean, those are the two countries that are fighting. Those are the civilians that are dying in this war. And it's millions of people that have died already in this war. I was on a flight myself a couple years ago from Poland to Israel. It was 100 Ukrainian Jewish refugees that had to leave and were going to Israel. And one of the couples were in their 80s. They lost their home in World War II when Ukraine was invaded by Germany. And then they lost their home now a second time when Russia invaded. And I couldn't help but sit there and think about, gosh, if I was in my 80s And I had just lost my home for a second time, and I was having to leave my country and move to a foreign country that I didn't really know anything about and start over again in my mid 80s. Like, how horrible and tragic is that? And it really brought home just the realities of war, and all those people on that flight, their sons were not there.
Yeah.
Their sons were there fighting the war and probably dying, and how tragic that is as well.
Oh, well, when you're talking, I'm thinking of all these things, and I don't want to go all over the place. But speaking of, well, those are a couple things. But when you brought up an 80-year-old, and having to go through the war-torn areas, and I think about the 80-year-olds here in America, and I think about how I see so many working at McDonald's, working at Taco Bell. Like, it breaks my heart, and they're doing it because they have to financially. Have we abandoned our seniors? What is it? The cost of living? Is it inflation? Is it Social Security? So
let me give you a stat. So right now, the average person on Social Security gets just over $2,000. I think it's $2,076 a month. That's what they get.
Well, when you say average, is that working X amount of years?
That is the average person receiving Social Security right now. Their check, the average, is $2,076 a month. And when you look at Minnesota and the Somalis that are in Minnesota, their average welfare that they get is about $2,700. Now, why should somebody who worked their entire life here, put into Social Security, be getting less than asylum seekers who came from a war-torn country in Somalia and came over here, and 10 years after they got here, 80% of them are still on welfare? That is not a system that is sustainable. It's not right. People coming here from a foreign country for the benefit of being able to live here. It's not a right. It is a privilege to be able to come over here, but you shouldn't come here and be put directly onto welfare and then to be staying on welfare for 10 years, not providing for yourself while our own citizens are getting less than you're getting. That is a system that doesn't work, but I believe in my heart that it's a system that Democrats set up on purpose to try to get a voter bloc that they believe could never be beaten. If we bring people here and we give them asylum, and when they get asylum, they get the right to vote, they become citizens, and then we get them onto government sustenance and welfare where they're going to stay on that, then they're only going to vote for the people that they believe are going to increase their benefits.
And that's the border, right? The open border policy.
Absolutely.
It was so crazy. So my mom, I want to say at least 30 years ago or whatnot, she said that the open border policy that Democrats want is because that's their voter bloc. And I thought she was crazy. I was like, Mom, no one would just want, someone to come in illegally because that would be a secure. I was probably 15. That doesn't even make sense. No one is that manipulative or whatnot. And lo and behold, that's exactly what it is, right? It doesn't matter about safety, security. Doesn't matter, right? And like you were saying, it's
politics before the protection of American citizens. Absolutely.
Because it sounds good. Oh my gosh, there's these people who they just want to be an American just like you, just like your ancestors came over. They had to be the first ones.
I had a conversation like this with a pastor, and I won't say who it is or what church or anything, but he was advocating to support the illegals as they come across. And I was against that and didn't think that we should do that. In fact, said, hey, we have people here in Gilbert. I have a whole list of people from House of Refuge that are homeless, because House of Refuge, 88 homes for single homeless mothers, amazing organization, 90% efficient in taking people through their program and then helping them after a year to get off.
They have some great success
Love what they do.
Stories.
But they have a big waiting list. And so, I was frustrated that we weren't helping the citizens here in Gilbert who are homeless and focusing on these people coming across our borders illegally. And his response to me was, Jay, I just want to love people. Is it so wrong to love people? Mm-mm. And of course, it's not wrong to care and to love people, but it is wrong to have a system that's set up and incentivize people to come here illegally, to not do it the right way. And that we have supported a family from Haiti and brought a couple of young men here and did it the legal way, got through the education visa system, and then put them into college. They never were on welfare. They were never getting benefits. They just came here for the opportunity, took advantage of that, got a job, got a degree, went back and got an MBA, got married, and, are a benefit to society. That's the way immigration works. That's the way it's supposed to. But when you allow tens of millions to come across the border illegally, they're not vetted. So you create a system where you have, criminals coming across that border who are going to rape and kill and do awful things to people. And the fact that the Democrat Party is resisting ICE going in and deporting those violent criminals is horrendous. I can't understand it. If one of my daughters had been raped or killed by an illegal, and I saw a party that was pushing back against getting rid of those dangerous, violent criminals, like ICE calls and says, hey, we have a deportation order for somebody in your jail. And in sanctuary cities and sanctuary states around this country, they don't give that person to ICE. They release them back into society. That's ridiculous. And the hypocrisy that exists when you look at the Obama administration, because Obama deported 3 million people, another 2 million turnaways at the border, and didn't have these issues. Why? Because ICE, when they had a deportation order under Obama, would go into those same cities and they would say, yeah, absolutely. Here's the violent criminal. Deport him. And they did. But because they changed their policies and they created these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and decided we're not going to cooperate with ICE and we're willing to release violent criminals back into those communities and we don't care what happens and who else gets hurt as a result. That's where the conflict exists, and that's where you see the things that happen in Minnesota and in some of these other places.
And it is interesting because do they just think, I don't know, I think that hypocrisy is the thing that, like, above all else, right? If you're going to have a policy, you're going to have stick with it and then stick with it, right? It's just so frustrating, but that is so true. It's what's right for one administration. They'll just completely switch and change what's right for the next one based on probably just, I think it all goes down to the voter block.
It was a reaction to the 2016 election because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to walk in and that she was coronated and she would be the president and President Trump beats her. And all of a sudden there was panic in the Democrat Party. What happened? How did we lose? How did Donald Trump come in and win the presidency? And where are we going to go forward and get a voter block to be able to defeat him and not let Republicans continue to win on this America First agenda? And, the reaction, like your mom was so right in telling you from a long time ago, was to allow people to come across, to put them
at all costs,
at all costs, and put them into Democrat cities so they would be counted in the census, so that those Democrat cities and those states would get more members of Congress. They say probably 10 to 15 members in Congress right now are a direct result of that influx that was counted in the 2020 census. So you're getting more House seats then. And then they believed if they won, if Kamala Harris won, that she would then have been able to give asylum to those people, those tens of millions of people who came across the border. If they get asylum, like I said, they become citizens. They get the right to vote. It's what happens. The biggest mistake Ronald Reagan ever made. I love Reagan. He's one of my favorite presidents. He did so many great things for this country. But when you look, Ronald Reagan made a deal with Tip O'Neill. It was the Simpson-Mazzoli Act. They gave amnesty to 3.5 million people who are here illegally. The idea was we're going to close the borders. We're never going to have illegal immigration again. These people were here, so we're going to let them stay, let them work. They become citizens. Well, they also got to bring their immediate family members, so that 3.5 million was really closer to 10 million. And the vast majority voted Democrat. So you created a huge voter block of Democrat voters, but it didn't close the border. It didn't end illegal immigration. And now we're in the situation that we're in now.
Well, and I think, and Trump's actually kind of changed this view, right? When it closed the border, and from everything I can tell, magnificently, right? Got it closed. People aren't going over the border. It just took some,
It's still open, though. I mean, I went down there myself. Jason, my son, and I went down there and we visited the border back in, I think, October. And we went to the end of it where the wall stopped because the Biden administration didn't continue the wall. Even though we had all the equipment, we could have finished the wall. I think there's a 26-mile gap down there where fentanyl can still come across the border. The sex trafficking can still happen coming across the border there. Most of that has stopped because we ended the incentives. That's the biggest thing. All you had to do is end the incentives, and people were like, all right, well, if I'm not going to be able to come into this country and I'm not going to be incentivized, I'm not coming, and risking the danger and the cost of going across the border. And they showed me the areas on the border where under Biden, if you came across the border and said, claimed asylum, they had these big camps set up and they were giving them food and clothes and they had had Wi-Fi so they could get online. Like it's amazing. It was
Free
like
cell phone. Weren't they giving out cell phones?
it's
as well?
crazy what they were doing. Hey, come on across the border. Come here. Here's everything you need, and then we're going to release you. And I talked to some of the border patrol.
Pick a state.
Well, I asked one of the members of Border Patrol. I said, "How was it different under Biden and now under Trump?" And he said, "Under Biden, if you came across and claimed asylum, we processed you right away. You said where you wanted to go. We took you to the airport here and we flew you wherever you wanted to go." Like, that is utterly ridiculous. And Tom Homan, who worked for Obama and now obviously, working for Trump, said the biggest difference was had they processed asylum seekers right at the border, like the law calls for, and they put them into an ICE facility, they would have had to adjudicate the case within 30 days. And 90% of them would have been denied asylum and they would have been sent back. And they didn't do that because they wanted them here. And if they get released into the country, then it's 4 or 5 years before those cases, if they ever, get adjudicated. And so that's the issue that we have.
Well, I was thinking about the border, but Trump kind of was all about everybody out. And now, and that might be, I think he's got a huge, you could probably speak to this. I think he has a huge heart. And so I think he got pushback from farmers, right? Like, oh my gosh, those are our workers. He got pushback from some of the other, I think small businesses or whatnot, getting rid of everyone that was actually just doing a great job. They came illegally, but they had acclimated or whatever.
I might disagree with you.
Yeah.
And I do agree with Tom Homan because he did the best job. He was on with Bill Maher. And, talking with Bill, and Bill asked him that exact question. He said basically yeah, but, Teresa down at the coffee shop, we shouldn't deport her. She's been here for, 10 years. And Tom Homan did a great job of articulating, no, if you came here illegally, then you should deport and you should self-deport. And we cannot have a system where we reward people for coming across and breaking the law and coming here illegally. One of the things you do when you do that is you jump the line. The family that we supported down in Haiti, they have been trying to come here legally, the right way, and they didn't get through, and they weren't able to get asylum and come here because of the vast number of people that we allowed to come here illegally. And so you have to first start with the violent criminals and try to deport every single one of them. And that shouldn't be a partisan issue. No city, no state should not want to get rid of violent criminals to protect Americans. And then you have to get rid of the people who came here illegally and have them go back, self-deport, reapply. If you self-deport, then now you're eligible to reapply and come back. And if you wanted to, when you leave, then create a worker program so that you could come over on a work visa program and work. I'm not against people trying to provide for their family. I know it firsthand, more than most Americans, because I took my family to Haiti to do work in Mexico, to Malawi. Some of the poorest areas. We wanted to go there. We wanted our kids to see what it looks like to live in a third world country and how lucky they were to live in this country and to have a heart for service for people. And so I understand why people want to come here from those third world countries, but you have to have an orderly process.
Well, I guess my question is, do you think Trump's getting softer on that?
I don't. No, I mean, Tom Homan just did that interview last week.
Yeah.
He's very clear about that interview.
And he doesn't mess around.
Well, and he is the one that now is, the lead person in, our immigration process and what we're trying to do. And I keep going back to it. He is the one who did it with Obama as well. Like, what he's doing for Trump is no different than what he did for Obama. The difference is the way the media covers it and those sanctuary cities and those sanctuary states.
Yeah. So all the ICE, oh my gosh, all the bad press ICE has gotten. Do you agree with Kristi Noem getting asked to do a different position?
Yeah, I don't think you can spend, $200 million of taxpayer dollars when we're talking about getting rid of waste and fraud in government and spend that on a program. I think that was ridiculous. And I think that is the core reason, that they needed to make a change.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the Doge, what happened with Doge?
Yeah, I mean, I
was so excited
all
for
waste
that.
and fraud to be, to get rid of all the waste and fraud that exists in government. And when you look at Minnesota and say the $10 billion in fraud that has gone on there, that has been facilitated by the governor and, Democrats there, the attorney general. And then now looking at California, it'll probably be 10 times that amount in California. And I don't understand why, if you're a Democrat, why you would not want to make sure, like you want to help people, then why are you not trying to get rid of fraud that exists? Because you're not helping people.
Well, but are they lining their own pockets?
Exactly. Because if you fund NGOs, that the NGOs then turn around and fund your Democrat campaigns, you have this cycle of using American taxpayer dollars to fund your campaigns. And that's exactly what was going on.
Right. So, and then that is one thing. And then you feel like politicians are owned, right? That's the thing that you hear because you have to have money, right, to run a campaign. You have to have money. So then the people the people that are giving you money, they're giving you money because they want in your ear, right? They want to have some sort of they want to have, I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is, but they want to have it thank you. Access,
yeah.
Right?
So I had somebody early on, give me very good advice. And he said, this is what you tell a donor. Like your donations will obviously help me, and we have a similar view of what we want government to look like. And you think that I, am somebody who can go into office and is going to stand up for those beliefs. And the only thing your donations do is give you the opportunity to call me up and explain whatever issue you have. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do what you want me to do. And so I try to make that very clear as I'm going around. This election that I'm in CD1, is going to be the most expensive election in the entire country. Good. It's going to probably be about a $60 million congressional seat because the Democrats believe, like I said at the beginning, that they can flip that seat. So they're going to spend about $30 million to try to go in and flip that seat.
And I don't know if people understand it's from all over the country, the money, right? It's not, some people might think, well, you're running for a seat in Arizona, so then you're only getting, people are only donating
most of that
Arizona.
Money from the Democrats will be outside funding.
Yeah.
Will be outside money. If you raise $4 or $5 million yourself, and that's all capped, right? That's $7,000 maximum at a time that an individual can give to you. That's a lot of money if you raise $4 or $5 million, but you're talking $30 million on this seat. So the majority of that money is coming from outside and being spent on behalf of that candidate.
So how long have you been campaigning?
We announced in April, so it's almost been a year, which is crazy. So I was working for CBS, so I played in the NFL for 14 years. Then the next 10 years, I broadcast for CBS as an announcer doing NFL games, and decided to step down from broadcasting to run for office, and we've been doing it for almost a year now.
What made you want? I mean, because we joke about it, like, who would want to do that?
Why?
Why? Yeah, because you're under a microscope. I mean, it's kind of damned if you do,
so
damned if you
much.
don't. Yeah.
Especially when you're doing a job where you only have to work 5 months of the year, right? Yeah. During football season, I got 7 months off.
Coming from what you had, right?
And you get paid really well, and it's fun to do. Like, why would you leave that to get into politics? And for me, if I didn't believe that, God was really pressing me to do it, and felt called to do it. And if my wife didn't feel the same way, we had to be on the same page. I sat down with Rebecca. We went to D.C. We met with everybody in D.C. when we were thinking about it in March. And we prayed and just said, God, if this is your will, please open the doors. And if it's not your will, please shut them, like hard.
Slam them.
Slam them so that we know you're not in this. And all the doors kept opening very wide. And people were so gracious and kind and wanting us to be involved in this process. And I just think in general, we need more people in politics who have already been successful, who have already made their money, who aren't going there to enrich themselves, who are truly going to be that civil servant. Like my 6th great grandfather was Roger Sherman. Roger Sherman was a representative from Connecticut. He's the only man to sign all 4 of our founding documents. Helped write the U.S. Constitution with Thomas Jefferson. And when you go back and you study their lives, like what they were willing to give up was everything. They were willing to give up their jobs, their freedoms, their wealth, really their lives for this ideal, this goal of making a country founded on freedoms, founded on opportunity. And that's what I'm committed to. Like I want to go into office and try to effectuate change and do it the right way and honor God in everything that I do. Not saying in any way that I'm perfect. Quite the opposite. I am just a sinner saved by grace trying to walk with God on a daily basis. And somebody asked me, well, what does success look like to you? If you get elected and you go into office, what does success look like? I said, that's a pretty tough question. And I thought about it. I said, if my marriage is stronger at the end than it is right now, and I honor God in everything I do, I think that's success. And there's certainly a lot of things I would want to accomplish, but that's the foundation of everything I want to do. And so, for me, it's trying to utilize, again, the blessings that I've been given to impact other people.
No, I love that. And I guess one thing that I think about a lot with one, I hope we're not too far gone, right? And I remember Trump was talking about it, and it was like people were like, "Hey, you've got to run for office because I don't know if there's any looking back," right? Just over the years of corruption and just very different from what our forefathers had talked about and what was really there. I mean, I remember reading about how George Washington, right, when they asked him to run for president, he said, "I've done my time. I've served my country. Let someone else do it. Like, I want to enjoy my life. I want to." And I thought that's such a different mentality than what I think a lot of people get into politics for. Their net worth is something crazy, like 30, 40, some of the representatives, 30, 40,000.
They go from nothing to, hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then another thing that, speaking of that, is I think about like populism, and I think that's something that Trump ran on. And I think that was something that I really loved because at the end of the day, there is a difference, right? I feel like there's a two-tiered justice system or whatever, and it's like it's kind of us and them, and treated very differently than at least I feel. I feel like kind of the peasants, right? And then you have the politicians who have that elitism, who have we're up here, kind of you're down here, that type of thing. But I think that was one thing with Trump, which is crazy because that's not what people see. Is one thing that I really attracted me. It's like he shoots straight. He's talking to me like he would talk to anyone, right? And so I loved that. And it's funny because the people TD, oh, he's so arrogant, he's so this. But what I see is someone who's like, I'm just going to tell you what's exactly on my mind. And I feel like that's the honest way to do it, right? And because I feel like with politicians, they're trying to
be what you want them to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's disingenuous.
Totally.
And so I can meet anyone we were talking about before that I can have a conversation with and I can disagree with, and I might think, oh my gosh, that is terrible policy or whatnot. But if they're authentic and they are so believing in that and they are real with me, then I'm like, okay, I respect you. Right. But it's just, you just get a total different vibe from like some of the politicians. And I know you've probably, being in Washington, D.C., have felt that. But it's like at the end of the day, whatever you believe in, like be authentic. And I do that. People you meet on the street.
People want transparency.
100%.
They want you to tell them what you believe, even if they disagree with you. And that's ideally, that's what I'm trying to do. That is exactly the way that we're running our campaign. When I get pushback from other people and they're like, oh, don't do that, or you shouldn't do that. I'm like, well, I don't care. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I don't need this job. I want to go there, and I want to do it the way that I believe it should be done. I'm going to stand up for the beliefs that I have. I'm going to continue to care about people. I'm going to have conversations with people that are completely different than me. There's been a lot of pushback from Republicans. They found pictures of Rebecca and I and Bill Clinton, from 25 years ago when we were at the Michael Jordan golf tournament. One of the guys I'm running against sent those out, sent text messages out, blocked out Rebecca's face, made it look like an Epstein picture, even though he knew it was my wife, and sent it out and said I was partying with Bill Clinton down in the Bahamas. And, the dirty politics. But I had a conversation with my general consultant in our campaign, and I said, hey, we're not doing that. Like, we are not going to, I don't even want to see the opposition research and all the things that you might find on somebody, because I'm not going to utilize those to try to get into office. It's not the way I want to run a campaign. I believe in the American dream. I believe in creating those equal opportunities for people. We've committed our lives to it. We brought young men, brought them into our home, put them through college to give them that opportunity. And I'm going to do that in the district. I'm going to do it in the state. And I'm going to do it at the federal level as well.
Well, you brought up Epstein. So speaking of, that was one thing that I think Trump really ran on. And then something happened, and then they didn't want to release the files. Yeah. And now they have, I don't think all of them quite have been released yet.
No, they haven't. Yeah.
But
there's a lot of redacted.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
I'll give you two answers to that. First answer, the Biden administration had the Epstein files for 4 years. They did nothing with it. They didn't release it at all. They didn't talk about it at all. So it's so disingenuous and hypocritical for them now to go after Trump and to attack Trump for not being quick enough in releasing the Epstein files. I will admit and be honest that I think they should have done it much quicker. I think part of the reason that people put Trump back in office was they wanted transparency and accountability. And they wanted, if somebody did something with young women, underage women, they wanted them held accountable. And I want them held accountable. I don't ever want to think about that. As a father of 3 girls, to think about the fact that some girls, somebody's daughter, may have been in a situation where they were trafficked and used there and abused there. I want those people held accountable. I think the American people do too.
Absolutely. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein was an agent for Israel?
I don't know. I mean, there's certainly a lot of suspicion, and you look at how he made his money and how he got his influence.
Not a smart guy,
And
right? No great resume.
Somebody certainly was helping push him along.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get into conjecture, though. I have this argument with my son all the time.
Jason.
Yeah, because that younger generation, like
different.
they listen to all the conspiracy theories, they buy into it. And for me, it's about evidence. And when I look at any of these issues, like hopefully the American people will see what the evidence is. I think, when you look at the Kennedy assassination, everybody wants to know, just tell us what happened. When we talk about 9/11, be honest. Even if we made mistakes, be honest with the American people and release that. That's what I think Americans are craving. They want to know that their government is not lying to them, hiding things, not telling them the truth. They want government to get out of their lives. And then don't tell me how to live my life, but be honest with us about what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. And if we made mistakes, be honest about it and release that to the American people.
Yeah, it's there again. It's that hierarchy, right? Like we don't owe you anything. We don't work for you. We're like, actually, yes, you do.
Yeah,
you actually do. But that is a good point because the younger generation. I mean, our kids are like the same age, went to school together, which is amazing. But there is that generation.
That just means we're getting old.
I know. And you're a grandpa.
That's right.
And I'm a grandma.
We got 4 grandkids now.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
That's right.
And Rebecca loves it. I do too. I mean, it's so much fun, but she is just in heaven with those grandkids.
It's a miracle because we are not old enough. Like, we're just not old enough.
We're super young grandparents.
I know. And I'm like, typically like, wait, with our grandson, I'm like, oh my gosh, but like, I just did this. This should be my baby.
I know. I call Rebecca hot grandma all the time.
Yes,
I love it.
It's so cute. But speaking about, we were talking about like the transparency and that generation, but that generation, I truly believe, had a huge push in getting Trump elected, right? It was like that same, but now we're seeing, at least with, my son, and it's just like questioning everything, right? Because they don't feel like they're being, I don't know about lied to, maybe, but things just aren't quite adding up. There might not be hardened proof on a lot of things, but I think it's okay to answer I think it's
so they hear a clip on TikTok, they watch something on Instagram, they get in this algorithm where everything is feeding, whatever issue they're listening to and talking about, and then that's all they hear, and then they never hear the other side. I mean, that's the problem with social media right now, is that you get into these situations where you're being fed one narrative and that's all you hear. Even those conversations that I have, I'm like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What evidence do you have to back up exactly what you're talking about? And a lot of times they don't have evidence. They have conjecture,
right?
And you can't base things on conjecture. So at the core, I like what they want because they want transparency and they want their government to be honest with them. They don't believe that they have been. They look at what happened with 9/11. They look at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. They look at COVID, all these issues where they're like, well, what they said was not true and they weren't transparent with us. So why should I trust them on any of the issues?
Right, for sure. Well, you think about, not that I'm not young, but I am one of those that's like, I'm addicted to podcasts. And so I do listen to, and I don't agree with everything, but I think it's so great because to question it, right? Like I listen to Candace Owens, I listen to Tucker, I listen to all these people because I think it's fascinating. And
I've been totally disappointed with them to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So
let's talk more about that.
So we were gutted when Charlie Kirk was killed. Rebecca and I were walking out of the White House, literally walking out as we found out on social media about Charlie.
Was that day?
That day.
The day he was killed.
Yeah. And we laid in bed that night in D.C. at the hotel, and she said, are you sure you want to do this? And, I could feel the angst in her heart.
Running.
Yeah, because we're in the middle of, we just, in April we had started, and so it's 5 months later, whatever. And I said, I have more resolve now than I ever have. Like, I know that God has put it on my heart at this time for this reason, for this purpose. But I was really hopeful, especially when I went to the memorial. And, you're there and you're listening to our administration share the gospel. Like, it was amazing to listen to Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and so many people. It was the greatest worship service I had ever been to. It filled me with so much hope about the future of this country. And I really believe that this would galvanize conservatives and people who have a faith around doing what was right for this country and putting away partisan issues and, coming together and really emphasizing the nuclear family, emphasizing morality and doing the right thing. And the end result since then has been tearing the fabric of the conservative movement apart. And, I don't think when you look at our leaders, especially in the podcast world, like you brought up Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro,
Tucker.
Megyn Kelly, Tucker.
as well, yeah.
I said Charlie Kirk. I meant to say Tucker Carlson. But when you look at how they responded to Charlie Kirk, they all, instead of focusing on issues and instead of focusing on things that are going to help us win the midterms and focusing on educating their listeners, it has been partisan. It has been petty. They've been attacking each other. They, have cared about things that don't help at all. They have not helped this movement. They have not helped create a better knowledge base about the differences, because the differences between our two parties have never been further apart ideologically. The Democrats' response to losing to President Trump is to move further left, is to embrace AOC and Bernie Sanders and Mondami and this democratic socialist movement. And instead of talking about that, it's all been partisan garbage. It's been petty garbage. It's been inner fighting between all of these podcasters. And, to me, it's solely about getting people listening to their podcast and deriving revenue and wealth for themselves. And it's been really disappointing to me.
Well, and I think kind of what I hear is what they're not feeling that the MAGA movement is what they signed up for, right? It's because
that's the way they try to justify it.
Well, I think with Iran, I know it was huge, right? No more foreign wars. Like, we have to take care. There's so much going on in America, people suffering. On this, we have so much money we could just keep it, like you said, with Ukraine or whatever. Should help America first, like the people that, with all the prices going up, people that are so I think that's what I've heard from it. I've heard that a lot about, people that were very close with Charlie saying, well, he was getting a lot of pressure, right? He was getting a lot of pressure at the end.
More conjecture, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I don't have that relationship, but just more that, like, I had a relationship with him. This is what was going on in his life. So I think it's asking a lot of questions, right? More questions than answers, probably. But I think it's okay. And I see the pushback, and I see, because for sure it's like we had something so good, right, with the movement, and like you were saying with the Democrat, they're dismantling themselves.
What was the fundamental basis of what Charlie was trying to do? He was trying to, number one, represent God in everything that he did and honor God and bring people to Christ. Like, that was the fundamental basis of what he wanted to do. The second thing was to reach out to young people, to encourage young people, especially young men, to engage in the process, to understand where the stepways to success were, how to be a success, and how to be a success, not only financially, but with your family and in life and in fulfillment. And then I think the third thing was to bring a broader coalition together to support conservative causes and the conservative beliefs. And I just don't think, when you look at our podcasters right now, I don't see them doing that. I don't see them taking up the mantle and continuing to do that. In fact, I see the opposite. They continue to break apart this coalition and they fight amongst themselves, and they're not communicating why people should come together and fight for the things that are going to help all Americans. They're doing the opposite. They're worrying about, these ideological tests and, whether or not we should be supporting this and that, and not trusting the administration.
Yeah, no, for sure. The trust, I think, definitely is, because I think that from what I've heard, I can't speak for them, but from what I'm listening to, that I think that trust for sure is broken. But I think it's okay to, and I think you have a problem where then it becomes name calling, right? Where you saw that since COVID, all the name calling. So I think that they're asking issues of, like, is this really America first, right? There's this layer of elites who are donors and all this stuff. This is kind of how we were talking about with campaigns. And when you're raising money, right? As much as you say like, well, it's not an influence. Well, it's got to be because I mean, money talks, right? And if you want to have a movement, and so that was the thing that's interesting to me is at the end of his, right before the end of his life, that he was getting so much pressure, right? So much pressure from different people, and hey, you're having these big conferences, but you can't have the speaker, and you can't have the speaker, and so that I can kind of, it makes sense to me, right? When I listen to it, I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense. So we should just question it, I guess is all I'm saying, right?
What's the purpose though? What is the purpose of what they're
Because
doing?
we want to know who's really in charge. Like, because
What's
who's
the
really in charge?
what is the greater good? That's to me, right? What is the greater good? What are they trying to accomplish?
I think fixing the country.
Yeah, well, they're not fixing the country. They're tearing the country apart. They're not making it so that we have a better opportunity in midterms to keep the House. If we don't win the House, what happens? President Trump gets impeached, and they will delay for 2 years. Nothing will be accomplished. We won't be able to codify the agenda that they've done in the first year. Nothing will be accomplished at all. So what is the greater good of what they're doing? Are they bringing people together? Are they educating? The enemy is not within. The enemy is on the other side. The enemy is this Democrat socialist movement that wants to fundamentally change our country. And, look at what Mondami is doing in New York. And the taxes, the willingness to say that property rights should not be an individual right, that the federal government or the state government or the local government should control your properties and control what you can do with those properties, if you can increase rent or not, trying to take away private businesses and say, hey, we're going to have these grocery stores that are funded by the local government, which would destroy these private businesses. And then we know the end result of socialism is always regression to the mean. It doesn't work. And look at Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. She runs as a moderate in Virginia. As soon as she gets elected, first thing she does is 50 new taxes on everything. And increasing cost, increasing every penny that you're going to spend being taxed by the local governments and the state government, and then these crazy policies as well, fighting against common sense 80% issue policies. And so to me, that's the bigger picture. And if they're not focused on that and not fighting for that, then they're fighting for themselves. And that's what I see.
Yeah, no, and I think I think politics, right, is probably not that important. It sounds like it's just, I think they're trying to change the country from more back to there's transparency. So it's funny because you listen to it and here's something different, and then I listen to it something, and I'm like, at least we're having these hard conversations or nothing's ever going to change. But they're in a position they can because they don't have to worry about getting elected, right? So
no, they're worried about getting more viewers and making more money. Like that is the end result of what they're doing on their shows.
Yeah. Well, agree to disagree. But so it's just interesting. I like having those conversations, but I think having those conversations, I mean, Trump's had Tucker. Like, what do you think about Iran? What do you think about this? So, but that's one thing I love about Trump is he has those conversations. At the end of the day, you said he's going to do whatever he wants to do because that's what he does. But, and I think that's,
I think at the end of the day, he's going to do what he believes is best for this country and the future of this country. And I absolutely ardently believe that he and his administration, that is the grounding principle for the decisions that they make. And even if it's the hard decision, they're going to do that if they believe long-term that's best for this country.
So what's your favorite thing that the Trump administration has done? Is what's something that you disagreed with that they've done?
Yeah, I'll start with the disagreement, and we talked about I've been more transparent with the Epstein list, got it out as soon as possible, redacted it, get rid of the redactions as much as possible, and just be more transparent. And when you look at my favorite thing, for me, it's economic issues because that's going to impact everybody. And when I look at my son and your daughter and the future for that generation, and then our grandkids and the future for our grandchildren economically, like we were on a path to destruction for them. And for the first time in American history, this generation did not have more hope that they were going to do better than the past generations. And so what he did in trying to reset trade parameters with the world that had been in existence, most of them since World War II, and we had allowed these countries to take advantage of us and to take advantage of the American people and the American taxpayer by having unfair trade policies where they benefited and we didn't. We couldn't sell our products there, but they could bring their products here and sell them without having any tariffs. And then we had minus 26 trillion in investment into this country versus out of this country. Back in the 80s, we're net positive. At minus 1 trillion, Warren Buffett said it was unsustainable. And no one did anything. Neither party, none of the politicians, no one did anything. And we grew all the way to over minus 20 trillion. And finally, somebody stood up for America and said, no, we're not going to allow that. So I'm going to utilize tariffs. I'm going to utilize leverage. And I'm going to force these countries to invest back into our country. When you do a deal with Japan and you get $500 billion in investment into this country, you just started 3 projects, one in Texas, one in Georgia, one in Ohio, with that money from the investment from Japan, and doing a deal with the United Kingdom, and then doing a deal with Taiwan and, with the Philippines, and all these investments back into this country, trying to reset trade parameters and get investment back in this country. That is what's going to help the future generations and create that opportunity for them. And so I'm super proud of the fact that it was not the politically expedient decision. It was not easy to do. He knew that, that they would criticize him for it. The administration did, but they had the long-term perspective and they put the American people first.
Well, and he did. I remember he did say there will be some short-term pain. He was transparent about that. He said there will be some short-term pain.
And I should say, my first and foremost, closing the border. That was the best thing they did. And for 4 years, the Biden administration said, we need a bill passed. We can't do it without a bill passed. And then in a month, President Trump did it. And so that alone, when you look at these elections and you look at these 2 parties, you had one party that didn't care about the protection of the American people. They were willing to allow millions of people to come across the border illegally and put Americans in jeopardy and willingly allow them to be raped, murdered, fentanyl deaths to skyrocket. And you had a president who stood up and said, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to close the border. We're going to protect Americans.
Well, and so speaking about that, when he did the State of the Union address and talking about transparency and communicating, oh my gosh, the fact that one side of the aisle would not even stand up, right, for those things, for protecting Americans first. That's one thing that, and you will watch a congressional hearing or Senate, some sort of Senate hearing where they're, they're going after someone. That's the only way I say that. It's whatever.
The judiciary, which I love. It's great
and it's but then that. It's oh my gosh, it's quite entertaining. But then they're like, and then what they do, they walk out. And it's all right, if we really want to make the country better, we have to have those conversations. And that's not putting Americans first. That's putting your ego first. It's disgusting to me when they're just they'll ask their questions, right? It's a hearing that they called. So they're asking the questions of a witness. So they sit there and then they, bombard them or whatever, which is totally fine. But then as soon as their time is up, they get the hell out of there. And it's wait, did you really want to question this person? Did you want to learn what was going on? No, you wanted your soundbite. You wanted to come an angry old man or angry old, and then you got out of there. How is that going to change the country? How is that good for anyone? If I elected you, so you have to promise me, once you're in the Senate or any congressional hearing, then you have to just listen, stay the whole freaking time. You don't just get to put your 2 cents in and get out of there because your ego is so fragile and you can't listen to what someone else is saying. And getting so overly emotional is ridiculous. Or yes, being in the State of the Union, and maybe it's a president. I mean, God forbid, a Democrat or whatever, and you're on a different side of the aisle. If they're talking about something, like you said, you brought up Fetterman. Well, if it's a good policy for your constituents, it's good for Arizona, then yes, it shouldn't be just across party lines. But
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to go to Congress. That's why I want to represent Arizona. That's why I gave up a great job to go do it. And I'm going to fight as hard as I can for the beliefs that we have and to fight for, the people of not only CD1, but Arizona. And, I think we need people in office that are willing to have that fight, that have the thick skin already. Saturday Night Live already did a skit about me when I was playing in the NFL. Yeah, you can look it up. It's called The Jay Feely Story, The Long Ride Home. No, it wasn't positive. It was making fun of me the whole time.
But I mean,
I've been through that already.
But there's no bad press. No bad press, right?
Well, at the time, I didn't really like it. It certainly wasn't helping me when I was playing in the NFL and it's making fun of the worst game I ever had.
Oh, okay, got you. But
That's
I mean, I don't know. I think they could say anything. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on Saturday Night Live. That's amazing. But maybe not. I don't know. Well, one thing that came up. Well, speaking about Arizona, what would be one thing that for the country, right? We're talking about national level for Arizona. What do you think would be important, as a representative of your district of Arizona, that you would like to accomplish?
When we look at this economy that's growing, and Arizona and Texas and Florida, have growing economies, people moving here from all over the country, businesses coming here. You look at the TSMC project, it's going to be a $250 billion project. There's, a huge data center. We are one of the fastest areas growing those data storage centers, which are going to be so key to the AI revolution that's coming. I want us to be at the forefront of that. There's two areas that I really want us to do a better job. We have to communicate with the local people and make sure that these data storage centers and the AI that's coming doesn't increase the cost of energy for your local consumer, right? And they should be willing, as a company, you're coming in, you're building a $25 billion data storage center. First of all, you should be off the grid. You shouldn't be increasing the price. We have to have a consideration about water, because water is always an issue here in Arizona. But some of them, like the Microsoft and others, they have water that recirculates and they don't use a ton of water. It's the average of like a golf course. And we never look at golf course and be like, we can't have another golf course because we have water issues. But you do that data storage centers, and that's bringing billions and billions of revenue, jobs that are incorporated with that as well. I want to be somebody who fosters that environment, because I understand where the future is going and how important that's going to be. When you bring in, the investment like they did at Intel, and continue to bring those companies here that are at the forefront of the world's production, that's just going to help Arizona. When you look at the ability to go and to mine, these natural resources, these rare earth minerals. We have so many here in Arizona. It takes on average 30 years to get a mine up, running, and producing. It's ridiculous, the regulation that exists.
That, yeah.
And then we're dependent on foreign adversaries. And 90%, even if you produce it here, it's got to go get refined in China. 90% of the world's refining process happens in China. We can't afford that. If you think back to COVID and you just think about
I don't want to.
Silly like toilet paper, and how these commodities, all of a sudden we had, a shortage of these commodities because they came from overseas, and we didn't have the same shipping ability and we couldn't distribute them the same. And all of a sudden, if there was toilet paper at CVS, we were like, hey, everybody, you got to go get toilet paper. They got some at CVS.
Mike's dad had a storage unit full of toilet paper. It
Yes.
We had to have a toilet paper dealer come to our house.
That's a funny little example of a really important issue. Like, we can't be in a situation where we are dependent on foreign adversaries for our rare earth minerals that are in everything. All of our capabilities technologically derive from those rare earth minerals. And so we have to do a much better job of deregulating and creating environments where we can mine and produce, but then also refine here. And we should be able to do it here in Arizona.
How's your water bill in Gilbert?
Everybody has seen that water bill go up.
Yeah.
That's certainly an issue. And, if you're the governor, you can't bury your head in the sand and then not consider an issue, not have any leverage, not talk about it until your contract runs out, and then come with your cup in hand and beg, for a better deal.
Yeah.
You have to be at the forefront, and you have to have leverage, and you have to assert that leverage to get a better deal for Arizona.
Well, the upper basin states,
that's what Katie
right?
Hobson do, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was interesting. I heard her talk not too long ago. Talk about not being authentic. I wasn't picking up those vibes. I'm a feeling person. So I'm around someone, it's like, how do they make me feel? I'm like, not feeling it. Well, and especially
when you're scared to death of having a conversation that's off script, or you won't go and do a debate because you know that you're not going to come across well, that tells you a lot.
Well, and that was the thing. It was like the program, and it was Q&A, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, great, Q&A. And then so she, her people just walked her off stage, and I was like, oh, I guess I don't have a question.
Right.
But look, it speaks to what you're saying. If you can't have that off script and actually have a conversation, how are you going to lead anybody?
So this right here, this forum, right, talking for, what have we been talking for? Over an hour. And there's a lot of opportunity to say things that your opponents could use against you, right? Because you're talking for a long time. You are asking a lot of deep philosophical questions about this country, about international and war and all that kind of stuff. You have to be able to have the ability to have those in-depth conversations. It's what Kamala Harris couldn't do. She could not go and sit on a podcast and talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours about those issues, because she knew how bad she looked, so they wouldn't let her do it. And President Trump was like, sure, you want me to go do the Nelk Boys? I'll go do that. I'll go on Joe Rogan. I'll go on these podcasts. We can talk for 2-3 hours and talk about all these issues. That's what your politicians should be able to do. They should have the ability to have a vast base of knowledge, to be able to talk about issues, in a forum where they don't know exactly what you're going to say and what you're going to bring up, and you have the freedom to ask me questions. That's who we need as our leaders.
100. You should be able to have a conversation. That should be a prerequisite. You
right.
have to be able to have a conversation. Oh my gosh. Well, so one thing you're talking about, Arizona and the data centers and all of that. One thing that we're noticing, it's not just first time home buyers or whatnot, but affordable. And I'm in a lot of meetings being in real estate, right? With affordability, making houses, what is affordability? And my thought is, and so the answer is like we're seeing, and probably in other parts of the country, apartments. Like that's the answer to affordable housing, but it's like apartments, the rent's so high. To me, that's not my definition of affordable.
Yes.
So that was one thing that's come up, and knowing that we have like, say it's similar, early 20s kids or whatnot, and we're looking, and it's very different. Like Mike and I bought our first house in 1990. We were 20 years old.
We're 22.
Yeah. And it was, honestly, like we did the math, it was cheaper than an apartment. Like it was such a great incentive, and it got us into home ownership. And so for most people,
and that's the key.
Yeah. Most people, that is their biggest asset. That's where you build wealth, right? As a homeowner. So how do we, I guess, help the next generation to create that wealth, to have home ownership where they can build equity? And that's the American dream, right? And I think they're discouraged right now. And
that is the foundation of believing in something that's bigger than yourself. If you are a renter society and you don't own anything, then you're not invested in anything, and then you don't care about it. And I think that's what we saw in New York, and why Adami got elected. And
I totally agree.
He got like 80% of the young vote because
they have nothing to lose.
They have nothing to lose. They don't care. Like they look at houses and the cost there, and they're like, well, I can never buy anything. And interest rates are over 7%. And, so the cost is dramatic. If you bought a $400,000 home in 2020, and then you bought a $400,000 home here in Arizona, Gilbert, same exact home, right? And you bought it 4 years later, your cost almost doubled, your mortgage, just because of the interest rates. And so we have to do a great job of understanding where the affordability crisis started, and then how we combat that. And so I go back to the borders. When you bring across tens of millions of people, they have to have housing. And so it starts from the bottom up. And so they rent houses, which increases rent prices. If rent prices go up, then that's going to increase
supply
the cost.
And demand.
That's right. That's going to increase the cost of buying something. If interest rates go up, that's going to increase the cost of buying something. When you look at interest rates and how they went sky high, and inflation was at 9.5% under Biden because they just printed money. That when you print money, it's going to lead to an inflationary market, and inflation is going to go sky high, increasing interest rates because you're worried about inflation getting out of control. These are all not, you knew this was going to happen when you printed money, but that's what their administration wanted to do. That's what Democrats believe in. It's the policies that they believe in. That's right. And when you bring tens of millions of illegals across and you put them on SNAP, and they go into the grocery store and they buy groceries with their SNAP, what's going to happen to the grocery prices? They're going to go up, because you have this influx of tens of millions of people taking their SNAP cards and having them funded by the federal government and going in, and the state governments, and going in and buying groceries. And so that's where the affordability crisis, that's where it started. And the way that you combat that, especially in regard to real estate, is one, you deregulate. Look at the Biden administration. There are two major bills that they funded that was appropriated from Congress, was the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, right? Those two, trillions of dollars in spending. They weren't able to even implement those and take advantage of all those trillions of dollars in spending because of all their own regulations. So they were sitting there waiting for, okay, we're gonna lay all this fiber optic wire, we're gonna create an EV charging network, all these things that never got done, even though they had the money, because of their own regulations. They should look at it and be like, man, I think we have way too many regulations. Like we have the money and we can't even do these projects that we want to do. And so when you look at housing, if it takes 3 years for somebody to buy a property and then build a house because of all the regulations, well, that directly leads to higher cost. And those costs, because I have to hold that property. I bought that property. I'm paying interest on that property that's going to get then passed on to the consumer. So the cost of that when I go to buy it is going to be higher. And so the more we can cut regulations and we can streamline the process and build more homes, the better it'll be for that younger generation. And you create more affordable homes, and the opportunity to own a home and to be invested in your local community like you said, the foundation of your success economically starts with owning something and owning a home that grows and goes in value. So you're not just paying rent and, you don't have the value of something growing, but also you're invested in your local community then when you own something.
Yeah, for sure. We had have really good friends who bought property in Phoenix. Yeah, over 2 years for a permit.
It's ridiculous.
It's just, and it feels like, I mean, we've been in real estate for like 23 plus years, but it's like everything from California somehow makes its way over, I feel like, because we all know about the regulations there, and it's, from what I hear, 10 times worse, but it's like.
But look at the Palisades fires. Yeah. Nothing has happened. These homeowners can't even rebuild their homes. The homes that got destroyed by the fires, they can't rebuild them because of the regulations and all the changes and all the stuff that they're forcing them to then do with their homes that adds millions of dollars to the cost. Like, that's absurd that we would not allow somebody who went through the devastation of losing your home in a fire and then they can't rebuild because of all the asinine regulations.
Well, and I just remember like the round table, right? When Trump went down there and spoke, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to get it. And what was the mayor? What's her name?
Karen Bass.
Yeah. And the mayor, oh yeah. Well, it's pretty funny because he was calling him out. But I'm like, yeah, you all say, we're on TV. You all say that this is going to happen. Oh yeah, we're going to change that. Oh, we're going to do that. And then these people keep getting elected. Like, that's crazy to me. They keep getting reelected.
Who is the leading person for the Democrats in 2028 for president right now?
Newsom, probably.
Gavin Newsom. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
It's like, what?
All the fraud, all the waste that exists, the way that they have destroyed that state. And I love California. Like the coastline is so gorgeous, beautiful. You take from San Diego all the way up into LA and like Monterey. Like, those are some of my favorite places in the world.
Our daughter lives there.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean,
but I would never live there because of the asinine policies and the taxes and the inefficiency. And then, you look at all the, the policies morally that they try to push as well. Like,
well, COVID, all of that.
No, I'll give you an example. Like, this just happened, but they have a new policy, this kind of toxic empathy that exists, right, on the left. And they created a policy that if you have been in jail for over 20 years and you're over 50 years old, that you're up for this special parole. And so they just paroled this guy who had 3 consecutive life sentences because he raped and assaulted 7 girls from ages of like 12 down to 3. Why would they put this man back on the streets, back in society to go and terrorize young girls again and take him out of jail under this guise of empathy? Well, he's been in there, he's in his 60s now and he's been in there for over 20 years. Yeah, he should be in there for another 20 years and never get out. That's why they gave him 3 consecutive life sentences.
Right. It just doesn't make sense. And it's this right empathy or whatnot. And then, but if it was their daughter, I think the story would be different. And you shouldn't have to have something like that happen to you to not understand the importance of the justice system, right? And like putting criminals away, which is sad. I mean, but there again, that just means they're above it all, right? They're above it. Like, if it hasn't happened to them, then I think their story would change, I would think. But then his wife just is under investigation too. Newsom's wife for fraud, and it just runs deep. It runs really deep. And one thing that I always thought is it's kind of their religion, if that makes sense, right? And that's why I feel like Democrats as a whole, and not all Democrats, I'm sure. I have friends, but they're threatened by someone who is religious, or is what I've seen, because they want that to be their religion, right?
And you're dead on. So, and if you look at as God decreases, government increases. There's a direct correlation to that. And you look at the places that have the least amount of churches and the least amount of church service, it's all your blue cities and blue states. And so you see as God decreases and is not a part of people's lives, they have to fill that void, and the void is government. So government becomes their God, and that's what they, then focus on, and they want government to fix all the problems and fix all the issues. And government is the most inefficient, has the least ability to actually do that.
Yeah, no, 100%. So it's interesting, but it breaks my heart because San Francisco was the coolest place ever. like awesome. But that's what people are leaving California. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you should stay and fix it. If everybody leaves, but
But they continue with their policies to drive people out. They're talking about a 5% wealth tax right now, and people are flying out of California. They're talking about a 5% wealth tax that's not on income, that's on all your wealth, that is accumulation of your real estate, that's accumulation of, your non-realized gains on companies that you own, a stock that you own. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we could talk for like 3 more hours. This is so great.
We certainly
I'm just
could, yeah.
And thank you so much for coming in. I know you're busy and all of the things. I'm excited for you. I wish you the best of luck. I think that it's really nice to have this time to go. I think you do a great job for Arizona. It's an interesting world that we live in for sure. An interesting time. We need good people.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
that's why I'm doing it. I'm going to stand up for what we believe in. I'm going to stand up for the foundational freedoms that I believe that our Constitution gave us. I think at the end of the day, that's what most people want. They want economic tailwinds from government so that their businesses can do well, so that their kids, they have hope for their kids, and then they want government to get out of the way. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to live.
Yeah, keep all the conversations going. The more we talk, I feel like the more we grow and the more we learn. So.
That's why I sat down here with you.
I know. I know.
It's great. Thank you.
Well,
love what you're doing.
Thank you. Tell Rebecca hi for me.
I will.
Okay.
Sure. She said to say hi as well.
Oh, yay. Awesome. Thank you.
And my pleasure.
I need a timer because I never know the time.
11:30.